Hello and welcome everyone. Good afternoon from Washington, D.C. We thank you for joining us for today's policy briefing, Understanding the Role of Japanese Automakers and Suppliers in the U.S. Automobile Industry. My name is Shanti Shoji, Director of Programs here at Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA. We are pleased to have with us Mr. Manny Manriquez, General Director of Japan Automobile Manufacturers Association, U.S. Office, and Ms. Jennifer Heckmann, Senior Manager of DENSO, as our featured speakers today. As many of you may know, Sasakawa USA is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization dedicated to deepening the understanding of and strengthening the relationship between the US and Japan for the benefit of a free and open international community. Our activities mostly focus on the security and diplomacy aspects, and we do that through the engagement of exchanges, dialogue, analysis, publications, and networking. Just a few housekeeping things I'd like to go over. Today's event is being recorded and is on the record. A recap and video recording will be available on Sasakawa USA's website in the coming weeks. And lastly, we will have a Q&A session, and you can ask questions via the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. And please feel free to shoot us questions at any time throughout the discussion. All right, I would like to hand over the program to Dr. Satohiro Akimoto, Chairman and President of Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA.
Good afternoon. I am Satohiro Akimoto, President and Chairman of Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA. It is great to see you all. I am truly delighted to hold today's automobile industry event in the context of the US-Japan relationship. Japan has many business and industrial success stories in its history. The automobile industry commands special attention, among others. It is one of the major business and industrial segments, which has long been an engine of the Japanese economy and is still going strong, while some other industrial sectors in Japan have considerably slowed down. Putting aside the question of how many automobile manufacturers a country can and should have, Japan should be proud of the fact that Japan has many excellent auto manufacturers, auto parts suppliers, and related service providers to support a gigantic industrial machine, because not many other countries can do that. What is relevant to us today is the role of the Japanese automobile manufacturers and the suppliers play in connecting the US and Japan. Simply put, Japanese automobile manufacturers and the suppliers have become part of American industrial landscape by creating a large and complicated network of supply chains, producing vehicles, hiring American people, becoming full-fledged members of local communities. With all the challenges and issues emerging on the horizon, it is one big success story in the US-Japan economic relations. We have two excellent speakers today. Mr. Manny Manriquez is the General Director of Japan Automobile Manufacturers Association, US Office. The JAMA has just released their 2020 economic contribution data. Despite a challenging environment with pandemic, slowdown in economic activities, and shortage in certain components, Japanese auto manufacturers continue to maintain 95,000 direct jobs and invest in 28 states in terms of manufacturing, R&D and design, and distribution centers. Mr. Manriquez will represent views of Japanese auto manufacturers. Ms. Jennifer Heckmann is a senior manager of government affairs at the DENSO in North America. DENSO is a part supplier. It is a huge revered company in its own right in the industry. As a matter of fact, virtually every single car, regardless of automobile manufacturer's brands, has DENSO parts in it. Ms. Heckmann will present DENSO's business and her views to complement the big picture Mr. Manriquez present first. With that, let's begin. Mr. Manriquez, go ahead.
Thank you, Satohiro-san. It's very great to be here. I appreciate the kind introduction. I'd like to not only thank you, but also your excellent staff who's helped us prepare for this event. Greetings to all the guests who've signed up for this event. I noticed many friends and excellent colleagues are tuning in, and I very much look forward to seeing your faces at an event like this in the future when we're able to. For now, it's my pleasure to present this new information for you. This morning, we released our new annual data and US contributions information. So I'm going to highlight some of that data for you, as well as the stories that go along with that. And so the staff at Sasakawa USA have offered to share links of our release. And so I think you'll see in the chat feature here on this platform a couple of links. One is actually to this presentation, and the other would be to our microsite, jamainamerica.org, which has a lot more details. You'll notice in this presentation, there's a lot of small print. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but you can read more if you want to download this presentation. You can see all those details. For now, I'll provide an overview, and we can get into more details during the Q&A session as well. I think, as Satohiro-san indicated, our presence in the US, our member company's presence here, is very much a success story of the US-Japan relationship. And I think no kind of image better captures that than the next slide. And this is our US footprint here. It's suffice it to say, we've been invested here in the US for a very long time. So this presence has been built up over more than 4 decades. We now employ almost 95,000 American workers. That's in direct US jobs. And in the upstream firms and also downstream, and including spin-off jobs, our direct employment supports about 1.6 million American jobs. And so that's folks at restaurants, gas stations, any place where you can buy goods and services in the communities where our member companies operate. One thing I really like to highlight about the employment is that the direct employment has really held steady. And I think many of you on this event know that production in 2020 was down across the US and the entire global auto industries. Actually, sales fell about 14%. But despite this drop, our members' direct US employment held quite steady. And on top of that, cumulative US investment in manufacturing by our members grown to almost $56 billion. And so that's, there's capital improvements and modernizations across several of our member companies' facilities that are responsible for that. So, essentially when you add in the dealer networks and all the employment across the board that our direct employment supports, it's a 50-state presence, and our members' integration into thousands of communities across the country. Next slide, please. So perhaps the best consistent indicator of how deeply integrated our member companies are into the US auto industry is that for several years running now, they've built 1/3 of all passenger cars and trucks made in the United States. Now, a little bit later, we're going to hear from the largest Japanese headquartered supplier in the US. And this is just one of among thousands of suppliers our companies do business with here. And I raise that because this direct investment and this footprint has really drawn in a lot of investment from Japanese suppliers into the US. Now, we do business with Japanese suppliers, American suppliers, and other international suppliers as well. And it's really difficult, I think, to quantify just how much economic activity our members are responsible for over the decades. But I want to share one data point that's on this page that I think speaks to the mature supply chains they've helped to develop. Last year, we reached an impressive milestone. So since 1986, the first year for which we have this data, our members have purchased $1.3 trillion in US parts. Next slide, please. This slide talks about our investment in the future of the US workforce. One thing I just want to point out here, without getting into the depth of the text, is that really we're talking about highly skilled and highly adaptable workforce. Our members believe in lifetime education and provide it not only through their commitment to upskilling the existing workforce, but also providing them pathways to advancement, and in their efforts to address STEM education in the communities where they operate across the country. Next slide, please. And you can see these examples obviously here on the document, but there's a lot more examples of workforce development and STEM education initiatives available on the website. I just want to highlight a few of these. Nissan's 1.5 million in donations to Mississippi's historically Black colleges and universities. Subaru's Technical Training Center in Lafayette, Indiana, which provides its advanced STEM training to their production associates and even members of the community who are not employed at the manufacturing facility. We've also got, for example, Toyota's $1.7 million in support for underrepresented students to obtain their engineering degrees in Kentucky. Next slide, please. Here we get into high-tech automotive innovation. And I think many of you know that our members have supported and strengthened the development of regional innovation hubs throughout the US since the early 1970s. So there's a cluster of design facilities that our members have invested in Southern California. They're doing a lot of connected and autonomous mobility R&D in the Silicon Valley area, and in the Michigan area, automotive engineering. And all of our member companies that sell vehicles in the US market are invested in this kind of R&D and design in the United States. Next slide, please. So, much of this innovation is enhanced through partnerships with educational institutions, US government agencies, and various private sector companies. For example, Toyota's partnership with Iwatani Corporation to expand hydrogen refueling infrastructure in Southern California. Honda's partnership with Verizon to study how 5G can enhance safety on the roads. And Mazda's SkyActiv body lightweighting technology to enhance fuel efficiency. Next slide, please. A couple of numbers here that I think speak well for themselves. 50 models developed and designed in the US. And this is really with American and global consumers in mind. I can't underscore enough the importance of R&D and design and locating it here in the US. And so I think one set of numbers that really illustrates this well is that graph on the bottom left, which shows the increase in direct R&D and design employment over 10 years. There has been a 75% increase over this last decade. And we think that's a really good indicator of our commitment to advancing the technology of the automotive industry. And next slide, please. Our members also continue to provide new eco-friendly vehicle technologies. One stat that really indicates the long history of our deployment of these kinds of vehicles like the Honda Insight, the Toyota Prius, and the Nissan Leaf, is the fact that JAMA members provide 60% of all eco-friendly vehicles on the road today. What that means is that over the lifespan of the average vehicle, which is about 11 years, we've got these vehicles that have been deployed for that period of time. And so that really is the majority of the vehicles on the road today are produced by our members. Next slide, please. Each of our 6 member companies that produce passenger cars and SUVs and offer them in the US market they showcase their alternative powered models, and we've got them here. So we all know this is obviously critical to the future of the industry as we move to deploy more of these eco-friendly vehicles throughout the country and throughout the world. So I'd just like to highlight these vehicles for you here. There are some old hits as well as some newer entrants into the market. You can see more examples of that on our Twitter feed at Japan Autos USA, as well as on the microsite. Next slide, please. And we also highlight our members' history of environmental stewardship. in the report here. We've got a very long history there. Activities like our various members' zero landfill manufacturing operations, protecting and expanding natural habitats and various sustainability initiatives, all of which serve to protect the environment to the benefit of future generations. And next slide, please. And let's go ahead and go to the next one. I'm going to move through these slides a little bit more quickly to sort of wrap up, and I want to make sure we leave time for a robust Q&A session. This showcases our community engagement and supporting local communities. And if you open this document using the link provided, you can see these various examples. There are a lot more on the website and also on the Twitter feed that I mentioned at Japan Autos USA. And I think you can advance a few slides to the very end. Some more examples of our CSR. Thank you very much for your attention. Really appreciate the opportunity to present for you today, and look forward to Jennifer Heckmann's presentation and to the Q&A session. Thanks for listening.
Well, thank you, Manny, for your presentation. From the viewpoint of our U.S.-Japan relationship, I would be interested in asking you a question about American workforce, future of the workforce, cooperation, competition with the U.S. manufacturers, nature of mobility, and things like that. So hopefully I can ask those questions to you in the Q&As. I would like to invite Ms. Jennifer Heckmann now. Ms. Heckmann?
Thank you so much, Satohiro-san, for your kind introduction. And thank you to the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and your staff for the opportunity to participate in this panel and introduce DENSO to this esteemed audience. Also, thank you to Manny and the JAMA team for your presentation and overview. I think that there are many common themes that I will also be able to share during my presentation. So my name is Jennifer Heckmann. I'm part of DENSO's government affairs team. I just celebrated my 20th work anniversary with the company and completed my 4th year in DC as part of the government affairs team. During my career at the company, and especially the last 4 years, I've learned a great deal about the company, and I look forward to sharing those here today. Next slide, please. So as Satohiro had mentioned earlier, we are a very large automotive supplier. We're one of the world's largest mobility suppliers. We're focused on creating a future in which transportation is safe, sustainable, and efficient for all. The company's mission statement is contributing to a better world by creating value together and a vision for the future. And that's really part of our DNA. Our long-term policy towards 2030 is focused on 2 great causes, green and peace of mind, while inspiring others to work. So for green, our goal is to be carbon neutral by 2035. This is a true stretch target, and if achieved, this would make DENSO one of the first manufacturers in the world to achieve carbon neutrality. I'll discuss more about this a bit later in the presentation. When we say peace of mind, we mean accident-free mobility, worry-free mobility, and the freedom of movement for all. Next slide, please. So just a few slides about DENSO overall. So this is for DENSO Global. And in 20 fiscal year, DENSO's global sales were $44.6 billion. Our company has 288 subsidiaries and affiliates, and we operate in 36 countries worldwide with 168,000 associates, all of whom play an essential role in the company's design, development, and manufacture of cutting-edge thermal, powertrain, mobility, electrification, and electronic systems. Next slide, please. Our 4 focus areas for product and development are connected, advanced safety and autonomous driving, electrification, and non-automotive businesses. For the non-automotive businesses, this also includes factory automation, including robotics, and then agriculture as well. Next slide, please. In the United States, we have a total of 26 companies and affiliates, and we have a total of 41 locations across 15 states. This includes 11 manufacturing locations, 5 innovation centers, and we employ around 17,000 associates across the United States. In the US, we often consider ourselves an American company with a Japanese heritage. We started from humble beginnings, as I'm sure many other companies have, and our history in the US could be viewed as a transition or evolution from sales to manufacturing to design, and then finally innovation. I'd like to share a bit more about this in the next slide. So Denzel Corporation was established in 1949. This was after the company was spun off from Toyota Motor Corporation. At that time, we were known as Nippon Denso. And some in the audience may know that this name is composed of Nippon for Japan and Denso, which is a combination of Denki, which means electric, and Sochi, which means equipment. After our start, operations were growing rapidly in Japan, and soon Denso leaders recognized there were business opportunities in the States. And so in the early 1960s, a Denso manager, Andy Kataoka, was dispatched to the US. He toured the country with suitcases full of parts, and he visited so many potential customers. We've heard this story. All Denso associates know this story in America. But he finally made the first sale to John Deere. And Denso opened up its first overseas sales office in Chicago in 1966. And in these early days, our initial business was in starter and alternators. And these would be produced in Japan and then exported to the United States. In 1984, due to our expanding business and expanding customer base, Denso established its first overseas manufacturing location outside of Japan. This is located in Battle Creek, Michigan, and the plant was created to produce and supply thermal systems, including a lot of HVAC systems. At this location now, we have 2,800 associates working there. And overall in the United States, Denso has 11 manufacturing facilities across 8 states. Soon in 1985, Denso opened up our North America Regional Technical Center and then North America Regional Headquarters. This was the first overseas technical center for Denso as well, and this was opened near Detroit in Southfield, Michigan. This location serves as a hub for our design in the US, and currently we have about 1,500 associates on campus where they're engaged in everything from sales to finance to product development and testing and overall customer support. And finally, to innovation. In 2018, Denso announced a company-wide changes that represented one of the largest shifts in our business strategy. This shift was called our second founding. And this prioritized electrification, vehicle safety, automated driving technologies. This shift also realigned our organization to accelerate business execution and R&D. So in the US, now we have 5 innovation centers, and 3 of these were launched since that second founding announcement. These locations are in Seattle, Pittsburgh, and the most recent is our Texas Innovation and Connected Center located in Plano, Texas. Together, these centers and collaborative projects give the company unique opportunities to attract top talent, rapidly identify and work with new partners, and then develop solutions for future mobility. Next slide, please. So in the US, all of our North America major customers include all the OEMs, all the automotive OEMs. So GM, Ford, Stellantis, Toyota, Honda, as well as a number of heavy duty and off-highway customers, including Harley-Davidson, Cummins, and Caterpillar. In addition to our customers, we've also established a very large supply base in the United States. Our production philosophy is to manufacture in the region for the region, and we proudly source a majority of the materials and components in North America for use in North America in the United States. And we have over 700 business partners in 32 states. Next, I would like to discuss one of DENSO's great causes, green. Next slide, please. As mentioned, one of our great causes that is guiding our future is our focus on carbon neutrality, or green. Earlier this year, we announced our intention to become carbon neutral by 2035. And we look at that carbon neutrality in three important fields: energy use, the manufacturing process, and the mobility products that we make. This slide here shows this carbon cycle, where we look at the energy that we use within the manufacturing process, and also the carbon that is produced through that. For manufacturing, we look at the materials and parts that are used in our manufacture, but then also our manufacturing process. And then finally, we'll look at the mobility products. For specifically, I wanted to highlight one example of some exciting work that we're doing. It's specifically with regard to energy use in our manufacturing processes. Earlier this year, we announced an exciting effort in Japan where we installed a CO2 circulation plant on the grounds of our facilities located in Aichi Prefecture. The plant retrieves CO2 that is generated by gas-based machines, and this is combined with hydrogen to produce methane that can be used as fuel. We have an eye on commercializing this technology and plan to implement this technology across the globe. Next slide, please. In terms of our mobility products, now there's a lot of discussion about electrification. For vehicles, we consider electrification to include multiple propulsion systems, including hybrid electric, battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and fuel cell electric vehicles. DENSO is a pioneer in electrification. It's in our name, and we are a market leader in the electrification systems. We have a rich history of producing best-in-class motors, inverters, sensors, and electronic control units. And this history allows us to supply products in nearly every vehicle make and model on the road today, and including in many new vehicle launches that are planned for the coming months and years. One of the newer areas that DENSO is in is urban air mobility. Earlier this year, we announced a long-term agreement with aerospace leader Honeywell to develop and manufacture electric propulsion systems for aircraft. We will be initially prioritizing the urban air mobility segment with a focus on air taxis and delivery systems. Now, not only are we developing all of these, but we are working to produce these. And in 2017, DENSO announced a $1 billion investment to our facilities in Maryville, Tennessee. This investment is making Maryville our primary manufacturing hub in North America for electrification and vehicle safety systems. Not only this, it builds our capacity there so we can build these products at scale and be prepared for our customers and consumers' evolving needs. Next slide, please. Now, none of this can happen without our most valuable resource, our people. Manny had spoke about it in the earlier presentation about workforce and how important our workforce is. Similar to the JAMA members, DENSO we continuously work to support our current associates, and then we are also working to build a sustainable workforce of the future. Next slide, please. DENSO believes in the concepts of monozukuri, making things, and then hitozukuri, or developing people. And we see education as a lifelong process. That's why we invest in internal and external training opportunities to support our associates. And we've also created a culture of personal and professional growth, which is nurtured and encouraged. We have a number of programs throughout the company, including tuition reimbursement, internships, co-ops, and mentorship programs as well. One example of our focus on continuous learning is our recently opened technical training centers. And we have two of those, one in Battle Creek and one in Maryville, Tennessee. The centers are designed to be at the forefront of advanced manufacturing technology. And these act as hubs for training for our technical staff, including skilled trades, machine technicians, and engineering. So employees actually receive customized plans to develop and gain new skills and hands-on learning. And this is all to help develop both the associate, but also to help improve production efficiency and quality at our production locations. We also work to support the physical and mental health of our associates. At a number of our sites, we have DENSO family health centers. These centers offer primary care, physical therapy, pharmacy, and other health services at lower costs, and oftentimes at a more convenient location for our associates and their family members. Next slide, please. So one of the other themes that Manny had mentioned was community involvement. And as our company also has a commitment to the communities, and we want to be a positive force in the places that we call home. In January of 2001, DENSO established DENSO North America Foundation. And this foundation is dedicated to helping students advance their education in engineering, technology, and related fields. And we provide grants to colleges and universities across North America. The foundation, and through its grant-making process, also provides DENSO opportunities to meet with and then mentor students interested in pursuing these career fields. So since 2001, DENSO has contributed $13 million in grants to 53 higher education institutions. DENSO is also an active supporter of robotics and engineering teams across the country. Annually, DENSO sponsors First Robotics, which provides hands-on learning experiences for robots for middle and high school students. We sponsor individual teams, which includes mentorship and coaching at most all of our sites, as well as sponsors regional and district competitions. DENSO also is a sponsor of Robofest. This is an international robotics festival that was created by Lawrence Tech University, which is in Southfield, just a few blocks away from our regional technical center. This festival is also focused on robots for middle school and high school students, and DENSO sponsors the events and mentors teams and students from the local public schools here. Also, across the country, DENSO associates volunteer within our communities. We provide paid time off to volunteer, and each of the company locations often organize community projects focused on environment, education, driving safety. And then during the COVID-19 pandemic, DENSO also was involved with the development and manufacture of medical devices, including respirators and face shields. The face shields we actually donated to a number of local hospitals, again, in the communities in which we work. The DENSO Foundation also donated $2.2 million to a number of these community organizations. Next slide, please. I know that I may have gone quickly, but I hope that this provides a good overview of our company's story in the US. I think DENSO and the Japanese auto suppliers and the auto industry overall is really a great example of how the US and Japan have worked together. I think DENSO has had a positive impact on the communities in which we serve, and I know that they have had a positive influence on DENSO as well. Thank you again for this opportunity to introduce DENSO and our operations in the United States. I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, providing concrete activities of DENSO, which present support to the big picture that Manny presented first. So thank you very much. I would like to ask the first question from the viewpoint of US-Japan relationship. Both of you touched upon evolving nature of automobile industry. As a matter of fact, now it looks like there is a horizon for outside of auto industry, as Jennifer mentioned. I didn't know that you are working on air taxi and things like that. Could you, but in order to go into the new industrial sector, even if it's related to mobility, you need to have a highly skilled, sophisticated workforce. Could you elaborate on the requirement of a future workforce that you're looking for in the United States? And what do you do to help American people, American workers acquire those skills? I will ask Manny first and then Jennifer.
Sure thing. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I mean, this is the purpose of many of our member companies' workforce development initiatives and STEM education initiatives. Really, the purpose of those initiatives is to secure the talent pipeline of the future and to ensure that we can employ homegrown talent here in the US. So these training programs are for Americans across various communities throughout the country, but they're also geared towards students. I mean, some of the STEM education initiatives start at the pre-K level and go all the way up through high school. So really, this is an interest and a concern for our industry as we continue to advance the technology. Now, I think one point that's important to get across is that it's not just vehicles themselves that have become increasingly high tech, but it's the manufacturing process as well. And that's why really we need to employ more and more highly skilled folks across the board. I'm talking about, computer programming, software and electrical engineering. These jobs pay very well. They require a lot of education and a lot of skilling up. And so these are kind of long-term investments that we're making both in the automotive workforce, but also, in the advanced technology workforce, because a lot of the folks who we are training through these programs are going to go into various different sectors. But we really do view it as a business imperative and as a way to ensure that as the technology advances, we've got the talent necessary at hand.
Good. Thank you very much. Jennifer?
Yeah, I would agree with Manny. We have the same concerns actually. So on our manufacturing side, again, I think the skilled workforce, the needs are evolving. Suppliers, we are training our workers to be able to work with high-speed video cameras, the Internet of Things, a number of robotics. So, for DENSO, I mentioned of how we had set up these technical training centers. So we're able to provide some of that training hands-on for our associates. But also we are working with education and community leaders to help share what some of our technology needs and skill set needs are for that future generation. So we're asking and working with them to help build that curricula and what those skills would be needed for the future.
Thank you very much. One of the, I'm a sociologist by training, and I just wonder what kind of help, support, training do you do in terms of expanding employment work opportunity to a less privileged segment of this society in the United States? Manny?
I'm sorry, the audio cut out there briefly. Can you repeat the question?
How do you help a minority workforce to be more active in your industry?
Sure. I mean, there are some specifically targeted initiatives to help underserved communities. I actually mentioned one that Toyota does in Kentucky to help students of color to obtain their engineering degrees. The other thing that I think is really important to note is that the workforces that we see on the ground, and I visited various of these member companies' facilities across the country, the workforce on the production floor resembles the surrounding community. So these are job opportunities that our members are providing for people who live in those areas, right? And so, it depends on where you are, but there's a lot of diversity. And it's not only racial and ethnic diversity, but it's also gender diversity. So you see a lot of women on the production floor, and that's not always been the case, right? So I think our members are very sensitive to the needs of the local community and want to employ people from the local area. And they benefit from the training investments that we make at the facilities, as well as the STEM education initiatives that are done at the local schools and universities.
Great. Thank you. Jennifer?
I would echo what Manny has said. I know that for ourselves, DENSO we have a large diversity and inclusion activity and initiative. We had set this up back in 2019. We have an executive who leads that program. And for both engineering teams, we're working with a number of HCBUs, so historically Black universities, for recruiting purposes. And then also we're working with our business resource groups within each of the facilities to help expand the network for those various communities and help highlight how manufacturing is a great job, and our companies are great to work for.
Thank you very much. This is obviously not the commercial event, but let me ask you a personal question, if I may. You said that this is a 20th anniversary working for DENSO, and you spent some time at the DENSO's Korea office, right?
I did.
What's your observation of workforce at the DENSO from this viewpoint?
You know, it was a very long time ago. And I know that things have changed over that time. I know that for myself, it has been 20 years. I've worked at a number of different parts of the organization, including at headquarters. I would say that in terms of their workforce and then also the diversity of that workforce, it is changing. There are a number of more women and women in management that I have been able to see and be introduced to through my meetings when I've been able to go over and visit more recently. So I know that those are changes, and I know that it's very important to the company as well.
That's a very encouraging thing to hear. One of the 5 things that the Sasakawa is interested in is obviously diversity issues, women issues. Perhaps I will invite you back as a panelist for that. There's a question from the audience, which is actually addressed to Jennifer. And this is about priority policy matters for auto parts manufacturers in the United States at this particular time. What are the policy areas that you are interested in, important to you, to the extent that you can talk about? I guess this is related to your strategy as well. So.
Sure. I would say that we've talked a lot about it, but I think workforce development and, just training the workers of the future and our team members of the future, it's so very important. So I know that we spend a large amount of time, both as a government affairs professional, but then also at our organization. I would also say more recently, it's been supply chain issues, quite frankly. We've had a lot of discussions, not only for semiconductor issues, but also issues at the ports and all the things logistics related. So this has been a very important topic for us, and I think everybody in the industry and every other industry. So that's where we've been focused.
Thank you very much. Jennifer mentioned semiconductor supply chains, and obviously these are the subject matters that we are very interested in, not only from a viewpoint of US-Japan relationship, but global supply chain network. Manny, would you like to comment on those points from the viewpoint of Japanese auto manufacturers?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I can do is just generally comment on the supply chain. So obviously all of our companies have different supply chains, and a lot of that information is proprietary. So without getting into details about that, I think what I can tell you is just that, our member company facilities in the US draw a lot from local suppliers. So somewhere north of half of the supplies that they use in each of their vehicles that they manufacture at their US facilities come from the state where they're invested in and they're building, and the local states surrounding that area. And so these are supply chains that have been built up over about 4 decades in some cases, and therefore are really mature. And I think, you know, if you look at the U.S. content of our member companies' vehicles that they build in the U.S., it is very high and very competitive with the traditional American companies. So one thing that I think we're really proud of is that we've really redefined, you know, the definition of what is an American car, right? We're building these vehicles here. We've got high proportions of U.S. content. And I think that really speaks to, you know, the depth of the investment, the relationships that we've built up with American, you know, German, Korean, Japanese suppliers across the board.
Great. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Another question from the audience, which is with regard to mobility. You mentioned that concept of automobile industry has been evolving, and both of you touched upon mobility, much wider definition of industry segment that you are in. What kind of investment do you do in terms of future of mobility in the United States?
I'm happy to take it first. I mean, I'm definitely curious to hear what Jen has to say, but I gather we agree that whether we're talking about investments in eco-friendly technologies or advanced safety features and autonomous driving, you know, future mobility is a cornerstone of our R&D operations in the U.S. And that's why you'll see a lot of our member companies are partnering with technology firms, and why they have R&D operations in the Silicon Valley area, as well as in other parts of the country, and why they're involved in safety testing equipment and vehicles for connected and autonomous vehicle technology. You know, I'll give you an example. I visited a Honda facility in Ohio, and they're partnering with an organization there that has a large test track where they test out all this new technology. And, you know, it's a very sort of open architecture there. They let a lot of different automakers test their equipment there, and Honda is one of many. But, you know, there's a lot of, I think, information sharing between these kinds of organizations, whether they're research organizations or, you know, universities and our member companies. Another good example is, you know, Subaru Indiana and their partnerships with researchers at the university in Lafayette, Indiana. I'm blanking on the name. Purdue. It's Purdue University. We visited there, and the researchers there are partnering with the company to test out connected features and sort of what we call V2X, or you know, vehicle to everything technology. So, you know, this is really the forefront of R&D. And I think gradually what we're seeing is the deployment of some of these technologies on vehicles that are on the roads today. So advanced driver assist systems are featuring sort of these lane departure warning systems or front collision detection warning, that kind of thing. Little by little, you'll see more of this kind of technology introduced into the market. And, you know, I think some people sort of picture an autonomous future far off and don't realize that we're actually gradually making progress towards that future as we speak.
Right. Thank you very much. Jennifer?
You know, I would echo a lot of what Manny has said, but I would add just maybe a couple additional things. You know, for us, the future of mobility, when we think about this, I think that we also consider how things are changing very quickly. And, you know, for DENSO as a manufacturer, one of the things that we have been thinking about is also our manufacturing process, the design, the development process, and how we can accelerate that. And so recently, you had asked about investments, but recently DENSO announced an investment with Surat Technologies. This is an industrial additive manufacturing company, and they have technology that allows manufacturers to print metal parts. And so they can print them at scale. And so, you know, this is an opportunity to use this technology to really cut down the production and the development time for some of these new technologies, and again, new parts that we will need to be able to support. So we're very excited about that. It's slightly different than connected or V2X or those types of things. But again, we see this future being impactful for all around for the manufacturing process as well.
Thank you very much. Another question from the audience, and you partially answered the question, but if you could elaborate on it. It is about the possible strategy changes with regard to supply chain. You know, recently there have been lots of supply chain interruption. Do Japanese auto manufacturers and parts companies think about altering their supply chain global strategy in terms of redundancy, in terms of increased localization, and so on and so forth? Manny?
Well, I mean, I think the key word probably here is resilience, supply chain resilience. So, you know, our member companies are always reviewing their supply chains and ensuring that we do have resilience in the supply chain and that we're sourcing from a diverse set of suppliers. Yeah, I can't really get into specifics. We have so many different members, and how they do this is obviously sometimes unique to various companies. But what I can tell you is that, you know, one of the strengths of our member companies is that so many of the supplies come from the US and the North American region. And so, you know, trade policy is obviously very important. Investment policy is very important. I know a lot of you are kind of hungry for some details on, you know, sort of the hot trade issues du jour or other issues, electrification, et cetera. But I think, you know, I can say unequivocally that, you know, the US and Japan are working very closely on strengthening the supply chains. You know, that any policies that the administration or Congress pursue should support the deep investments in manufacturing, R&D, and the American workforce that our members have made over the last 4 decades.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I would add a couple of things as well. And while I will not get into any specifics, you know, for DENSO, especially for some of our supply chain issues that we have right now, we are continuing to learn. I think for DENSO and maybe many people of JAMA members, Kaizen, it's a touchstone. We think about it all the time. So of course, we are always continuously looking at reviewing our supply chain activities, how we can improve that. I would also mention that DENSO, and I'm sure a number of other companies we learned a ton of lessons during the 2011 tsunami and earthquake that impacted Japan. We saw those impacts and we implemented a number of countermeasures that we are continuing to look at and adjusting all the time. So I think that overall for semiconductors specifically, it's a long-term concern. And as our vehicles have more for advanced mobility, autonomous systems, electrification, there will be continued challenges for that. So we will continue to have to continuously look at, review, and then revise as appropriate.
I just want to ask one last question, which kind of, you know, we've been, obviously this is a US-Japan auto industry, suppliers industry event. And we've been talking about all the wonderful things. And there are lots of wonderful, wonderful things. But what are the one challenge that you need to address in order to further expand this successful story between Japan and the United States in terms of the auto industry?
The biggest challenge, I mean, I would say just keeping on top of technological innovation. I mean, you know, investing in electrification and investing in connected and autonomous vehicle technology is very, very capital intensive. The whole auto industry is a very capital intensive industry. So if you're an auto company and you're not investing in, you know, the newest R&D and staying on the cutting edge, then you're really in trouble. So I think that's more of a challenge today than it used to be, because we really are in this period of incredible evolution of the technology. So yeah, we got to stay on top of it.
Great. Jennifer?
Yeah. I would just add to that, having the people to be able to do and keep up. It is a common message that we have said, that we've touched on a number of times, but having people who are very interested in automotive and be able to see this future mobility and help us execute that, I think it's really, really important, and it's a really big challenge.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Manny, do you have anything to add?
Oh, just to say that, you know, I think that there is a lot of competition in the advanced workforce. And so when I visit member company facilities, I often find that one of the problems is that, you know, there's so much competition from other industries that, like Jennifer said, you know, we have to invest in this workforce, and we also have to ensure that the younger generations understand that this isn't old school manufacturing anymore, right? It's safer, it's cleaner, and we're producing what are essentially, you know, computers on wheels. So it's an exciting industry, and I really hope that, you know, that our efforts to sort of train up the future workforce are very successful, because the U.S. is a very important place for us to continue to invest in and to build, you know, world-class vehicles here.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to all the questions, but I'd like to thank Mr. Manriquez and Ms. Heckmann for your generous contribution to the discussion and the presentation. I truly enjoy our conversation, and I hope that we can invite you back when the right time comes up next time. So thank you very much, and thank you for the audience for joining us. Bye-bye.